When Caroline Levitt sat down for the interview, she expected a debate, a few sharp words exchanged between two opposing sides. What she didn't expect was a moment so explosive, it would unravel one of the most respected TV hosts in the industry overnight. And it all went down live, on air, with no chance to edit, censor, or soften the blow. The Morning Current, a highly respected political talk show, was known for sharp debates and aggressive hosts. But it was the man sitting across from Caroline that turned the heat up that day, veteran journalist Paul Danning. A career built on confrontation, Paul wasn't known for playing nice. This interview, however, would be unlike any other. Caroline Levitt, a rising star in conservative politics, was a well-practiced debater. She was used to contentious interviews, but nothing had prepared her for the fierce intensity of Paul Danning. As the segment began, the tone seemed typical. Paul pushed Caroline on her stance regarding media bias, accusing conservative outlets of peddling false narratives. But Caroline wasn't here to back down. She countered with facts, pointing out where mainstream media had misled the public or omitted crucial details. At first, it seemed like just another day in the political arena. But then, something shifted. Without warning, Paul leaned forward, his expression tightening. His tone, once controlled, now carried a biting edge. "You're the reason this country is backsliding," he snapped. "You push this fake narrative of victimhood, pretending conservatives are being silenced, when in reality, you're the one silencing everyone else." The studio fell silent. Caroline's eyes sharpened, her composure unbroken. She'd been through aggressive interviews before, but this was different. As Paul doubled down, his words hit harder. He accused her of wanting control, of pushing an agenda rather than standing for free speech. Caroline paused, letting the tension hang in the air. She knew this was a turning point. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady but razor-sharp. But Paul didn't back down. Instead, he clarified and dug himself deeper. The tension was unbearable as Caroline took a moment to process his words. "Would you like to clarify what you mean by your people?" she asked, her tone measured. The moment the words left her mouth, everyone knew. Paul had made a massive mistake. The implication behind your people wasn't lost on the audience or the millions watching at home. Paul stammered, "I meant conservatives," trying to cover his tracks. But it was too late. Caroline's calm response was as deadly as any sharp retort could have been. "So just to be clear," she asked, "when you said your people, you weren't referring to anything beyond political ideology?" Paul, a seasoned journalist with decades of experience, realized too late that he had walked straight into a trap. But instead of admitting his mistake, he shifted the conversation, trying to dismiss Caroline's question. But she wasn't having it. The interview continued, but the energy in the room had changed. The crew, once relaxed, was now visibly tense. Caroline remained calm, but her presence was unwavering. She didn't need to shout or interrupt. Her composure spoke volumes. Paul's fatal mistake came when he went further, making a blanket statement. Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing something to society, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The silence in the studio was suffocating. It wasn't just awkward, it was explosive. Caroline, unflinching, responded with one simple question. "Are you saying conservatives don't contribute to society, Paul?" The room fell even quieter, and in that moment, everyone knew. Paul had just crossed the line. What followed was nothing short of media chaos. The clip, a simple 15-second snippet of Paul's words, went viral within minutes. It didn't need context. It didn't need a prelude. Just those words, "Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim," were enough to send the internet into a frenzy. Within hours, the hashtag #FirePaulDanning began trending. Media outlets jumped on the controversy, dissecting every word of Paul's interview. Political commentators from both sides took to the airwaves, some condemning him outright, while others claimed it was another example of selective outrage. But one thing was clear. This was no longer just about an interview. This was about something much bigger. The world was watching, and the repercussions were far from over. As the social media firestorm raged on, advertisers began to distance themselves from the morning current. By midday, 3 major sponsors had suspended their partnerships with the show. One by one, others followed suit, releasing carefully worded statements about reviewing their commitments. Behind the scenes, the network went into full damage control. They had a crisis on their hands, and Caroline, without uttering a word, had made it all happen. By evening, executives at NBS News were in a state of panic. With the internet still buzzing, it was clear that a decision had to be made. Defend Paul and risk further alienating viewers, or cut ties to protect their reputation? The network had no choice but to place Paul Danning on indefinite suspension. The statement was carefully crafted, but it was a move born out of desperation. "We are committed to fair and respectful journalism," they said, a vague declaration. That couldn't hide the true motive. They were watching the situation unfold, unsure of just how bad things would get. The problem? The internet wasn't going to let this one slide. The next day, the situation escalated further. Caroline appeared on another show, and when asked directly about Paul's future, her answer was both measured and devastating. "I think people in positions of influence should be held accountable for their words." Within hours, the network's final decision came down. Paul Danning was officially let go from NBS News. For some, it was a moment of justice, proof that no one, no matter how high profile, was above accountability. But for others, it was a prime example of cancel culture run amok. Paul's firing split the country. On one side, people hailed it as a necessary reckoning, proof that the media could no longer talk down to half of America. But on the other side, the critics saw it as an overreaction, the result of a single misstep. The conversation quickly morphed from Paul Danning's firing into a broader debate about what happens when public outrage controls the narrative. As conservative outlets praised Caroline for her role in taking down Paul, liberal voices remained uneasy, unsure of the larger implications. After all, if a seasoned journalist like Paul could be fired over a single comment, who was next? Then, Paul broke his silence. In a pre-recorded video released late one evening, Paul Danning addressed the camera, his face tired but resolute. "I was fired because I spoke the truth," he said. "The media doesn't want truth, they want compliance. If you step out of line, you're erased." Words echoed across social media, and within hours his supporters rallied behind him. Calls for boycotts against NBS News began to spread. Meanwhile, critics of Paul's rhetoric pushed back, arguing that he had simply crossed a line, no grand conspiracy, just a failure to understand the consequences of his words. But as the internet buzzed with the latest updates, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about Paul anymore. It was about the future of media itself, about accountability and the role of social media in shaping public discourse. The questions raised by Paul Danning's firing wouldn't go away. Was this justice, or was it an example of the dangers of viral outrage? And the questions kept coming. How much power should the public have to dictate consequences? Who decides what crosses the line? As for Caroline, she moved on. But her name would forever be linked to this moment, a pivotal turning point in the ongoing debate over media bias, accountability, and the role of influence in shaping public opinion. Was this a long-overdue moment of accountability, or was it a dangerous precedent for cancel culture? What happened when Paul lost his job isn't just about him. It's about the future of media. And as for you, the viewer, where do you stand? Do you think Paul should have been fired, or was this an example of cancel culture going too far? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more thought-provoking stories.